Hello and welcome to the Alchemist Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people.
I'm Emily.
I'm KristaLyn, and sometimes the most grounded thing you can do is just like be a little unhinged. Like
Ah,
just do the thing and not plan it and tell stories.
right? So last time we were talking about how we were going to do like a story time podcast because we haven't done that in a while. So we're gonna. I don't know what stories are going to come out. We haven't planned at
Yeah.
all. I do want to start by just having like a little bit minor bitching moment where I just kind of bitch a little bit about how yucky this not Mercury retrograde, but Mercury retrograding feeling past week was. What was that? It's garbage. I dislike it. It wasn't
Yeah.
that it was a bad week. It was actually really awesome. And I know it was the solstice energy and the full moon energy, and like that combo didn't necessarily do us any favors as far as like this Mercury retrograde go. But like communication problems, technology issues, like it was all breaking and everything was dumb.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like a societal or collective experience, right? Like everybody has been having it, which makes me feel good that I'm not alone, but also makes me feel bad that we're all doing it. Like we're all going through this. So everybody who has been just feeling like it's like there's darts coming from everywhere and my feet are stuck in the mud. So as much as I could dodge them, and I should, I can't because I'm stuck. And it's funny to me because that is very much the energy we're going through as we have this Saturn Jupiter square coming up. And
Mhm.
Jupiter is in Gemini, ruling Saturn, who is in Pisces. So we've got this whole like Jupiter scatterbrained, wanting to sample all the things and everything coming from all over the place. And it's like, here's an opportunity, here's an opportunity, here's an opportunity. And then Saturn's like, hey, I'm slowing down and coming to a stop though. So your support is like, rather than being on a locomotive that is going steadily forward, it's screeching to a halt. And now we have to back into the station again for maintenance. And
Mhm.
yeah, so the full moon in Capricorn and currently in Aquarius. By the time you see this, it will probably be out of Aquarius and into Pisces, which is Jupiter ruled where Saturn is, and then into Aries, where it kind of breaks free from them for a hot second. A hot second because Aries. And thank you, Zelda. I hope you all heard her give her.
We did.
Yeah, that was Zelda. She's precious. She agrees. And so that's kind of where we're at. The moon was ruled by Saturn in both Capricorn and in Aquarius, and then Jupiter in Pisces. And as these two are coming to their square for their first real interaction since 2020, a lot of us are feeling that, both on a societal scale and because of the societal scale in our personal lives.
Yeah. Yeah. No, super fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't, as I said, it's not bad. But if you want to give your Saturn stress ball a good hefty squeeze for me,
Oh,
I
you
could
guys
I
here,
could go for
share in
that.
my
Just
seven
like,
stress ball.
yep, squeeze it up because F you Saturn being all stationary and poking at our faces.
I mean,
I
yeah,
think the
it's a lot
energy of
of
that's going to kind of break up. Yeah. There you go. Thank you. I do think the energy of that is going to kind of break up this like weird technology, like backward feeling space that we were sitting in this past week is going to kind of move along. And there has been some really, really cool. I think a lot of people are experiencing ahas and drive to do new stuff and directional changes and things like that. And that is freaking cool. Awesome. And a lot of what we said last week to focus on during the solstice, I think is very beneficial for people and they're connecting with that. And rock on. I'm feeling that. I know, I hope you're feeling that too, of like stuff that is changing in a beneficial direction, but it was like, you got to pause and watch everything break first. And it's like
Yeah.
physically break. And it's like, why are we doing that? Like the no, no. Um, but it is what it is. So that is going to change and shift this week. Thank goodness. It is kind of a like a little bit of a nappy sort of week though, where you're just kind of like, I need to sleep. I might feel need to like if you feel like you need more sleep this week, yeah, man, you do. And it's really cerebral. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people get into really like deep, deep conversations with people, but then you almost like lose the point of it and then end up being kind of like, okay, well, that was a thing that we did.
Yeah,
So,
I will agree with that for astrological and life experience reasons. Like I've noticed in the last week or two that it's been a lot of demand happening of like, here's that thing you want, here's that thing you want, here's that thing you want. They're all not happening right now. They're going to happen later. And now all of a sudden it's like, I understand these frustrations I have and how they're going to help me, but I still have to sit with the frustrations I have. So even though I know why they're helping me, it doesn't take away the fact that I have to endure with them.
mhm.
And before Saturn goes retrograde, Mercury is going to trine it, so making it a little bit more cerebral, putting some pressure on our thoughts,
Mhm.
and giving us this like idea of what are we doing for the long haul? What are my long-term goals, and how do I have to rework some stuff until I can do it? And then, we've got some support-ish later this week as Saturn goes retrograde. At least Mars and Venus are looking at each other in a kind-ish way. They have a sextile. And so we might find that we've got relationships that are coming up too, that are going to help us go through all this and break through some things.
It's really transformative summer.
Mhm.
Like, it's just like every time I look at the energy, I'm like, gosh, stuff is just gonna,
Yeah.
there's good and there's bad to it. And I don't want you to sit here and be like, oh, it's just love and light and optimism, because it's not. But what I will say, I was thinking about this morning pretty significantly. The energy of this summer reminds me of the energy of 2021,
Mm.
where abundant things and ahas and shifts, and like even just looking at like how the TikTok algorithm worked, like it was a lot
Yeah.
easier for people to go viral, and like things like that come in this summer. And I don't know why, but it almost just feels like a nostalgic callback to that time. And it's cool. I actually like the energy. 2021 was a pretty, amazing year for a lot of reasons. It was also kind of a not so great year for a lot of reasons. So I don't want anyone to be like, what? I don't want to go back there. Ah, like don't do that. But also if you're like, oh, it was the best year ever, I want to go, like, don't do that either. It's going to be kind of in the middle ground there. But I really do see some things feeling very reminiscent of that time, of how things just kind of work to connect us. And I really like that transformative piece, because it was a hugely transformative year. And the way it's coming up, it just feels nice. I
Mhm.
like it.
Do you want to hear the astrology?
I do. I saw the face. I saw the face
Yeah,
halfway
yeah, I
through.
know.
Like,
I
oh,
have there's astrology for this place. Um, so in 2020, on the December solstice, we had the changing of an entire epoch where the Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions shifted elements for the first time in the last 200 years, right? And they came into Aquarius, and they went through Aquarius for a year together, 2021. And
Mm,
so now we have them having that first square, the opening square of their 20-year cycle that we are now kind of coming to the culmination of. And so the nostalgia for that is real, because that energy is back and we're feeling it and we're wanting to act on it. And so I think, for us as Scorpio moons, there's an energy of like okay, what next? Can we actually do something? We're not going to tolerate not inaction anymore. And I think that's going
mhm.
to show up on social scales. I think, I've listened to other astrologers who study world astrology, and I'm checking their work with my own, just to A, understand it better, and B, see where they're pulling the information from. But they're predicting a very dynamic summer as well. And I think a lot of it is centered around that square that's coming up in August by perfection. But the sign-based square is already in action and will be through mid-June next year, late June next year. So we're going to be seeing a lot of, it's time to do something energy.
Yeah, it feels like some like dam breaking energy. Like
Mhm.
really just a bunch of dams, just like
The song in my head is "We're Not Gonna Take It." Exactly.
Yeah, we're in rare form today, my
I
friend.
know. I know. We're great. We're doing great. We came here to tell stories, and that's what we're going to do. It's also a bookend episode. And
It
before I
is.
forget, because it's been very, and of course it's because we're talking about the Fae that it's been very hard to hold on to these thoughts, right?
I
But
know.
Deity Academy is doing their discussion and our channeling session of Celtic deities, and including the Fae, talking about the lore of Celtic lore, which is so unique
Right.
compared to other lores and legends that there are out there in mythos, and
Yeah.
also how to work with the Fae, channeling in some deities, probably channeling in with the Fae as well. If you're interested in that, on forgottenstorytellers.com, you can actually join us for that one session. And yeah, I'm not forming my words very well with this one. Em, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I will totally take it on. So, basically, we're doing our Deity Academy channeling session this coming Friday. So when you hear this, it will maybe be like the next day or the next, 2 days for you, depending upon when you're hearing this episode. But we would love for you to come. You can it's basically just a ticket just for this one event. During this event, it's an hour and a half long. We give you a lot of background and understanding of the Celtic deities, and also what the Celtic deities do for us now, and the Celtic which also include fairies because they are so intrinsically linked. Important to note, though, not the only culture that has a very strong belief in fairies. I think that is like a Western like misconception that happens a lot of time. Also, that when we typically talk about the fairies, we're not actually talking about any culture's belief in fairies. We are only speaking to our own personal experiences with them. So we're going to talk more about the cultural understanding and the mythological understanding of the Celtic version of Fae, as well as the deities of the Fae pantheon, and then we're going to channel them in. We're going to talk to them. We're going to see what messages they have for us. We're going to also answer your questions. So if you're someone who's like really, really drawn to like your, let's say your Irish heritage, or you have very strong pull to Scotland, or even England, anything like that, we're talking about those mythologies. We're talking about those deities, and we're going to be channeling and talking to those deities, and you can participate with us with that, and you can come bringing some questions for those deities, and we will happily channel in and ask them about it. Plus, you also get access to our Phasma box recording session with those deities as well. So after the call, we hop on the Phasma box and we do a recording, essentially, where we talk together to those deities, and they get to actually talk back through the Phasma, which is really interesting. I'm excited to see how that's going to show up with the fairy energy. So anyway, if you want to do that, it's on the ForgottenStorytellers.com. So Forgotten Storytellers website, you can go head over there to the events tab, and that's where you can grab your ticket for that channeling session, which will be happening again this Friday. So yeah, that's what we're doing. I will say, on the notion of like storytelling, one of my favorite astral experiences ever. I do astral a lot. So first of all, let me like preface this. The reason it's one of my favorite is because it was at a time when I was not astraling nearly as much. I would say I probably do some astral stuff at least once a day at this point in time. Do a lot of astral things. Um, so it's very normal now, but at the time it definitely wasn't. And one of my truly favorite astral experiences, I did end up it was not by design, but I got kind of like yoinked into one of the fairy realms, and the Morgan was there, and she helped me with some stuff and gave me a gift of like what my new validation symbol was. It was fern. Um, and basically like gave me energy that I needed for that time, which I didn't realize I needed at all. And then she like shoved me away to a different part of the fairy realms. And I was sitting at a tavern that was made of a giant acorn in a tree with this little fun fairy friend. He had a beard and he was amazing. And he had like the most laughing eyes I've ever seen. Like you could barely see him because they were just constantly all smiley. Um, and we drank out of these fun little cups of whatever we drank in a tree that was an acorn. And so that's what I feel when I tap into this energy of this Celtic call of like, fun, let's do that. I've been to other fairy realms, done a bunch of stuff since then, quite significantly, but that one just always sticks out in my mind, especially when talking about like Celtic deities. I've worked with basically the Morgan a little bit. And that was one of the first times that I did. That was not intentional on my part.
Yeah, I have heritage, and like my original foray into folk magic was attempting to get into Welsh magic, because when I was in like third grade, ma'am had to come pick me up from school because I was having a medical thing again. So I ended up hanging out with my ma'am a lot because I had to go home from school a lot. And she started talking to me about, you're the only one of my grandchildren that shows any signs of having the Welsh witchcraft. And I, as a Christian kid that mom had already been like, ignore any kind of intuition you think you have. I was just like, the what now? Like, I have signs of it. There's a real thing. And so me being the studious little 8-year-old that I was, went to the library to find books on this. But the only library I had access to was in the elementary school. So naturally I found nothing because my school didn't have Welsh witchcraft books. Go figure.
Weird.
Yeah,
Weird.
but I did know to go to the library to figure things out because we did not have computers in the classrooms yet. Um,
Yeah.
but I remember she and her aunts, to me, were very much, she had us watching Practical Magic all the time. She had us watching Hocus Pocus all the time, Halloween
Okay.
Town all the time. So you could see that there was something in her that really wanted us to understand something there. And she is the same grandmother that I ended up having to walk to the other side when she passed.
Mm.
So there's still something going on there. And she connected with me when I went to a conference and spoke at my first conference that was centered on magic. And she sat there and like took everything in that she could. Like she told me how much she would have wanted access to something like that because she knew it was there, but she had no one to teach her. So I have this triple goddess energy where she and my aunts for bowling league, right, would put their heads together and focus real hard and then try to win a bowling game. I was too young to really pay attention to if they won or not or how effective it was. But they always said like they accidentally hurt people, like people got into accidents when they got mad at them, or they could make things happen. And she was always like, be very responsible with what you desire. And I did find that growing up of like there was some responsibility I had to take in certain energies where it was like I would think something and then it would happen. And immediately, like I would just be like, oh no, I'm being the Welsh witch. I have no context to this. I don't know if it's good or bad. So that's my like lineage and experience, which I've had to read up on significantly to understand, oh, it's triple goddess energy that they were tapping into. I think more unconsciously than anything, because she was in a more orthodox version of Christianity than I was in her. I think she was more Catholic because her church was St. John's. Um, so yeah, but
Yeah.
there's just a lot that I got by a very detached way because my family didn't want me to learn that way. I think she would have taught me everything she knew, but we didn't have that kind of opportunity. And I don't know how much she really had access to. So
Yeah, fair enough.
yeah,
I love that you went to the library to look up Welsh magic books at 8 years old.
yeah. And
It's something
you
I would
get
have done though.
recorded.
But also my mom was the librarian at the time. So I spent so much time in the library. I cannot even describe how many hours I've spent in the library because my mom was the librarian. I've read a lot of books in elementary school. A lot of books. It was funny this year my kids were like, we have to read 30 books this year for our English school. And I was like, hey, go for it. You can do it. And they were like, what? Like, we thought you'd be like, wow, that's a lot of books. I was like, nah, not going to do that. I'm not saying that everyone should have that goal or anything, but for them, being in school and having reading as a requirement, was something I achieved easily in like the fourth grade because I was just like constantly pumping it out. And so they did not get the sympathy they were looking for from me on that note. Like, yeah, no, like you can listen to them now too. I didn't have audiobooks. I just had to entertain myself with them. So which is funny. And then go figure, like they complained about it. And then I think all three of them read like 40 books this year or 50 books this year. I'm like, yeah, see, it's not that hard. Like you guys this is your job right now. You have nothing else you're doing. Just read the books.
I miss the days of just sitting at my desk and reading all the books. That was
Well,
nice.
do we want to talk about what books we read this month? And then we'll dive into
Oh,
more stories
let's do
since we're
book.
in that.
Yeah, we'll do the book end first. We will begin with the book end.
Yeah.
Ba-dum-tsh.
Um, yeah, we will. What did I read? Oh,
Ugh.
if you heard that noise, I don't know if the microphone cut it out or not, but I just like blew my lips because I am so annoyed. And I talked about anxious people last time, right?
You
I
did
must have.
a little bit,
Okay.
but do some more.
Anxious People is incredible. Everyone should read it. It's a wonderful book and it made me so happy. It's a 5-star for sure read, no hesitation. I love that book. Then I followed it up with The Honey Witch and I Want to Scream.
The Honey Witch.
It's called The Honey Witch. It just came out. It came out like 2 months ago. Just came out. It's by Sydney J. Shields. Um, it was advertised as Bridgerton crossed with practical magic.
Yes, I've heard of this.
Yeah, don't read it.
Oh, my
Don't
heart.
read it.
Virginia.
Um, Here's the thing. The writing itself, like the actual prose, isn't horrible. I think she does know how to write. The story construction, what the actual fuck happened with that? Like, why did we do that? Why did we do what we did? Okay, so spoilers. Little sprinkly spoily spoils. Just gonna put that warning on here because I'm not gonna try to. If you want to read it, go for it. I despised it. Because of the last 25% of the book mostly. But you can do it if you want. Here's the thing. There's two different types of magic in the book. One is honey magic, and that is all about creating life and things like that because you're using honey to do so and you're like enriching the land and whatever. And then there's ash magic, and that is all about renewing things. So you burn it down so that the honey magic can come in and renew it. It's a really, really cool concept that plays really lovely into kind of this Bridgerton Regency era world that they are kind of throwing on the backdrop, which is neat. The first little chunk of the book goes slow. It's a slow start. And I was kind of like, yeah, it's pretty. Like, okay, whatever. I'll be in this world. Then it kind of gets a little quicker, but I think we could have done without as much of that first kind of slow chunk. I don't think it was as necessary. And then the second part of it, you start to kind of like the characters. And you're like, okay, cool. I dig these people. The main witch, girl, she's kind of trained to be a witch, and her grandmother who trained her passes away. And she's kind of stuck there and she's really lonely. The whole thing is she's under this curse where you can either have magic or you can have love, but you can't have both. Like you can't fall in love. That's like her curse.
Magic said.
That happened because the Ash Witch cursed the Honey Witch line because of stuff. And so she's contending with that this whole time, which again, that creates some cool stakes. There's some cool magic, there's some cool stakes. Problems start to happen. So she's obviously falling in love with this one girl that she's like friends with on the island who doesn't believe in magic, but you kind of get feelings that she also is kind of magical, throughout it. And you're kind of like, what else is going on here? But then her island that she's supposed to protect is starting to get sick. Like the land spirits and stuff are like getting sick, and it's terrifying, and she's really concerned about it. And then that same day she gets an invite to her sister's wedding, which she obviously has to leave the island to go to. Because like, why would you stay and protect your island with its sick spirits that is literally your entire job when your sister is getting married? So then we start to betray our character growth. From that point on, we betray a lot of our character growth, a lot of it. By the end, there was about 30,000 different options that they could have done that would have made it a really empowering, cool, magical, bonding, neat book. She took zero of those chances, ended up doing a ton of trauma to all the characters for no fucking reason. The resolution wasn't even magical. It wasn't even a magical resolution. She spent one whole chapter preparing all these honey potions to use against this evil witch that was coming. Did she use any of them? No, she did not. No, she did not. No, she did not. And I get they were trying to do like a love saves the day kind of poetic thing. It could have been done so much better in so many other ways. I came up with like a whole list of like 5 or 6 different things that they could have done to end this book. That was not the way they ended it. That would have still had the same underlying point, but would actually made more sense for both the characters and just genuinely been better. The thing that got me though, and I'm just gonna, this is like an own personal thing. Again, spoilers, as I've been saying, spoiling it up. The last page, the epilogue of this book. This is 3 months after all the trauma happened. She's with her love. They're sitting under the tree and they're doing the magic to conceive a baby. And that's where it ends. Fuck you.
Of course they are.
I was
sorry,
so mad. I was so mad. Like I was fucking pissed. So anyway, that was sucked. It sucked. I was very disappointed in what ended up happening with it. It could have gone really, really cool. Much like the 3rd season of Bridgerton could have gone really, really cool. Anyway, beside the point. And then I am almost done with Little Thieves, or I'm a little over 50% on Little Thieves. So review coming on that one. But it's much better. So far, it's much better.
Cool.
It's fantasy set in a very German world. And the stakes are so high, and every page they get higher. I'm like, how are they still like what are they gonna do? So we'll see how it resolves. I know there's 2 books in the series. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. What about you? What'd you read?
So I had come off a bunch of reading from Norwalk, right? So I was like, I'm gonna do something. We had talked last month about Hell Followed With Us. And I was like, you know what? I want to try to read this because I'm getting my master's in divinity. I want to see what some of the, what the feelings are in here that I can then represent and bring into my awareness as I'm learning about this. The first page tells you that this is the author's anger and that they are still angry.
Oh, no.
The energy is palpable. And I said to Dan, like, I'm trying so hard. I got 37% according to Kindle through it. And I was like every day approaching this book almost ready to be beaten is what it felt like. And there's a lot that I relate to, and there's a lot that I totally get where they're coming from, and there's a lot that reflects my own experience. But the anger this author feels, I felt like there's nothing that I could do, just having been associated at all with a fragment of this culture. There was no way I could redeem myself. There was no way I could do better, and there was no hope for the world. And so at some point, Dan noticed me like just being hunched over and sad, listening to my book. And he was like, how about you give it a break for now and come back to it later? Because this is not what reading a book should be like. And so I haven't removed it from my list because I acknowledge the validity of the feelings this author has. But at the same time, it is difficult to live in that energy where you know that this has not been processed and found a resolution or a completion. And because I have to register for my classes soon, I focused on listening to the rest of my textbook, The Story of Christianity, which it was amazing. These two textbooks, The Story of Christianity, Volume 1 and Volume 2, are totally open about when a Christian movement will take something and make it all about themselves, and it's totally out of context and meaningless. Like, spoiler for the textbook, they talk about 9/11 and say how America and the Christian people of America immediately made 9/11 centrally about them, even though it was an attack on the world and civilization and not just them. And this
Mhm.
book says that. And I'm just like, thank you. Like somebody zooming out a little bit, which was great. And it goes through the, like, it'll say this was arguably the worst decision they could have made. And it made such a horrible impact. And so now I move on to a book from a book by an ancient author named Irenaeus called The Scandal of Incarnation. And I'm having such an interesting time because the commentary, it's about Gnosticism and like in the earlier period of Gnosticism. And I'm pretty well versed in Gnosticism
Mhm.
um, for reasons. And so I don't agree with all of Gnosticism, but I think that there's a really cool mythos there
Yeah.
that's interesting to contemplate. And this Scandal of Incarnation by Irenaeus goes into kind of trying to explain why Gnosticism bad and other Christianity good. And the commentary by a person named Hans Urs von Balthasar is so biased. So every statement is an opinion in these things. So I'm going through and half of my notes are like he'll say like obviously this is this and I'm just like is it? And so I can't wait to get into discussion over this in class to simply say like I hope you chose this book so we can learn how to disagree with the text or how to be
Yeah.
discerning about what a bias is and what like I don't agree with all of what Irenaeus says and I don't disagree with all of what Irenaeus says. I disagree with the fact that the person who was allowed to put this book out there is basically blogging his frustrations and he's like
That's
Irenaeus
amazing.
goes off on tangents and doesn't form a good argument here and gets really over emotional here. This is arguably the best theologian of the era. And I'm just like, is it? Like, how? Because, yeah, so there's a lot of bias involved in it. At the same time, I got into some fiction again because the Scandal of Incarnation does not have an audiobook. So I read The Lord of Stariel by A.J. Lancaster and it's cute. It's like Bridgerton with like fae undertones, like the
Okay.
fae kind of interacting with the way things are going through the lords. And it's in a world that is a lot more like the general faith is presumed to be more pagan. And I love that. They'll just like lightly mention their different gods, Oster being one of them, right? Not Ostera, but Oster is mentioned in it. And it's just like really cool to live in a world where another religion is just the commonplace and, you know, in that kind of cultural context as well. However, because they're so proper, almost all of it is just dialogue. It's them sitting in a room talking about their problems when they could be taking action. So like I like the way it turned out. I like the way the problem as it was resolved. I like how it didn't go exactly the way you expected or the way you'd roll your eyes and then expect it to go when there was the you know presumed twist.
Hmm.
There are apparently 4 other books in the series. I probably won't read them simply because they're so cozy. I literally did. I read them or listened to it on my flights back from Denver and did sleep through most of it. And Dan said, "Did you go back and reread it?" And I'm like, "No, I know everything that happened because I can pick up on context from the next sentence." So like I didn't I listened to the whole thing mostly in a state of unconsciousness. Um Cute, not bad. Could be better though. And now I'm listening to Adam Silvera's Infinity Son. It was recommended to me a couple years
Hmm.
ago.
Okay.
You can tell it was written a couple years ago because things are like epic and cringe and like all these very particular slang words that have evolved since then. I haven't come up with a feeling on it yet. I'm only about 21% of the way through.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Another
would
big
like to get out of a reading slump though, to be totally honest. Like It's been very slumpy this year, which is so unfortunate because last year I had like one hit after another and I was so into it, whatever. And then I did the Way of Kings series, which I'm glad I did. And that was all, of course, really good. And then since then, it's not gotten better. I think, you know what I think is kind of happening too? And I don't think this is all books either too. I think publishing is changing so significantly to like lower what is putting out that
Mhm.
it's not great right now.
Yeah.
And I blame people who read exclusively like romantasy because they're wanting so much demand. So like, and if that's you, I'm not blaming you specifically. I'm just saying that like I think that there's a huge culture of like, but I want the next. What's the next one? I want that same feeling again and again and again. And it's the same like dopamine hit space, which don't
Mhm.
get me wrong, like that's amazing. And reading is supposed to be an escape. And if that's what works for you, fantastic. I just think it's not doing great for publishing.
Yeah, I agree. I think the publishing company is focusing so much on the market that they're missing the art.
I do think so too. I really do. And so it's very interesting. That being said, the other book that I've been reading all month is La Custa because it's done. I finished La Custa. It is done. And I'm really, really proud of it. And I'm in the midst of content editing it, but it should be done very soon as well as far as the content edit goes. And then I will be sending it off to pitch agents, etc.
Mhm.
I'm really stoked for it. I wrote the dedication to it yesterday. If you want to hear it, I'll read it.
Oh my gosh,
I'll read
please.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
sneak peek. You guys get it here first. Um, for all the women whose stories were deemed not worthy enough to tell, and for Lacusta, may you know that you, or may you have peace knowing that yours is.
Ah, I love it.
I know she deserves it. I'm really happy about it. But anyway, that's what I've also been reading. Just
I
pass
love
on.
how dedications are actually little spells for everybody who opens the book.
Yeah, they really are. They
Yeah.
really, really are. Especially if they're done well.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong, you can totally like dedicate something to like your dog and your mom or something,
Hmm.
but I think there's so much more potential there to actually make the dedication just meaningful and actual spell work. And some of my like favorite dedications set the tone for the entire book.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are just as good. It's like the start of the good reading experience
Hmm.
that comes in.
Agreed. Yeah.
So I agree. Yeah. So there's most of us we're story timing it up. Look at us go. So Rebecca was out here earlier this month. We had an amazing time, and there's going to be more content coming from that. I did want to share, this was just kind of interesting. When we were in Virginia City, so we went to Virginia City. If you guys don't know what Virginia City is, it was the place where they first discovered both silver and gold in Nevada, and it is still the same as it's been since then. Like truly the same. Most of the same, like the streets and everything. The courthouse is still the courthouse. That is where you still do court proceedings, and like it is very much still the same in a lot of ways. And it's a very kitschy Wild West sort of situation. They do Wild West shows, etc. They have like camel races once a year, and it's it's a whole experience. But I want to take Rebecca out there because it's one of those places that is extremely haunted. It's actually the first place where Mr. Zach Baggins claims to ever have seen or experienced a ghost, because he's a dick face. But beside the point,
I mean,
there is a lot of
if you want to hear us pick on them more, come to Sacred Spaces and do the Spiritual Science Theater 3000 add-on, because that's the
yeah.
point.
Yeah, yeah. So Zach Baggins, if you guys don't, if you're like, who the fuck, what, who does Emily have beef with? I have beef with Zach Baggins. One, because I think he's just a like the most gross example of a straight white dude ever. Like if you look up a picture of him, the number one picture on Google is him wearing his glasses on his like his sunglasses on his forehead on a red carpet. That's the douche we're talking about.
Mhm.
Um but also he is one of the three that are part of the Ghost Adventures team. And one of the Ghost Adventures team I really enjoy, and the other two I'm like, could you stop? Uh, but anyway, there's multiple locations in Virginia City that it's small, it's really small, it's super small, that they have investigated. And it's a hot spot for a lot of paranormal investigation. So I want to take Rebecca out there to see what she would pick up, but also because on that note, like when there's a hot spot for paranormal investigations, that also typically means it's a hot spot for energy work done badly.
Mhm.
Um, most of the time when people banish ghosts or spirits from a location, they just like don't. They
Yeah.
just like create a bunch more problems energetically. If you don't know what you're doing, then you can really just mess stuff up. The other thing is like also there's like a level of disrespect to like those beings that were in people. So one thing that we noticed when we were out there, we were talking. There was like a group of kind of male ghosts kind of following us around and kind of keeping their distance. And eventually we kind of got them to warm up through a couple different things that we did. And we were talking to one and we were like, hey, like, what's the deal? And they're like, oh, we hate people like you. Like, you guys have messed up stuff for us a lot. And we're like, oh, that's totally fair. Why are you so upset? Like, what stuff is messed up? Maybe we can help. Maybe we can do something with it. And there was this investigative couple. I don't know who they are fully. I have some suspicions of who they were that came in a while ago. I think like in the 90s that came in,
I think
and yeah, and they installed these, they looked like swirly, like marble walls almost in the energy to like solve some ghost problems, to stop these hauntings or whatever. But what they ended up doing is they basically either trapped ghosts in buildings so they could not get out, or trapped ghosts out of buildings and created like a tent city of ghosts that were just separated from their loved ones that were now stuck inside buildings. Like, it was like really yuck.
Mm-hmm.
So we removed a bunch of those, and it was a really interesting experience. The whole energy changed of the whole place, because I was like, no wonder you hate us. Like, no wonder you hate people like that. That's messed up. Not to mention you've been poked and prodded and made to dance on command and all these different things with, again, like the Ghost Adventure show and other paranormal investigations and all the stuff. And they have, an investigative tour you can go on, whatever. I'm like, I hate everything about that. That goes super against my ethics and morals. Like, I'm not against paranormal investigation inherently at all. I just think paranormal investigation should include mediumship by someone who actually knows what the fuck they're doing, which is what Theron talks about all the time. So check them out or see them at Sacred Spaces to talk about it more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was a really interesting experience. And then everyone was very, very happy. And they're like, can we give you a gift? And we're like, no, we don't need, like, it's all good. You don't need to do that. And then for some reason, they were like, okay, we're going to do that. So when we got back to our car, all of a sudden the church bells turned on. And I say turned on because they don't actually have bells anymore. So they project the sound over the speaker. It was like 3:42 p.m. It wasn't like a time when it should have happened at all. And it was this whole song that it all went through. And then after the song, it just stopped. And they're like, here's your gift. And we're like,
So cute.
thanks.
That is so cute.
Right? Isn't that cute? So that was we had many stories, but that was one of my most recent stories. That was it was really cool and super validating. And they were all really happy to have the help. It was by no means fixed all the problems that were there, but wow. One of the worst parts about it is one of those things was on the school. The school's like one of the most haunted places in the town. The reason for that is because they had trapped all the children's souls inside the fucking school with this wall. Awful, awful thing to do. So,
Yeah. Very
yeah.
close-minded people thinking they know everything.
Mm-hmm.
Hardly ever does a good job.
Anyway, what's your stories recently? What story do you want to talk about?
Well, the one I teased last week was the story of the astrological story of how I previously died and how I've discovered when I will likely die next.
Yeah, we know when Krista's gonna die, guys. I told my mom, before you say this, I told my mom, I was like, Krista figured out when they're gonna die. And my mom's like, what?
I love your mom so much.
No.
So many people know I have died once when I was 10, and it's so funny because I was given so little information on how to exist after that. Like, truly, I had this 10-hour long brain surgery in Boston when I was 10, which is significant. It was only like 2 weeks after my 10th birthday. And during that surgery, the woman who had been teaching me my first mode of energy healing, who just appeared out of my church congregation when we asked for prayer, and then taught me every week how to manipulate, see, and use energy, which I am now teaching to my students this week in our folk magic lesson. I'm so excited.
No.
She was teaching me how to center myself and do all these things. And she was in an airplane in the middle of my surgery. And what was going on in the operating room at the time was that the doctors were running into so many capillaries in my brain and kept popping them that my brain died. And
Yeah, maybe we don't pop capillaries. Just a thought.
yeah, I mean, those are just little strokes kind of situations, like a lot of them, enough to kill the brain. And the one doctor, the
Actually.
anesthesiologist, had explained this to my family afterward when I was still being brought back out of everything. And he said, like, everything dipped, it went bad, and the doctors stepped away and just put their hands up because there was nothing else they could do. And suddenly it came right back up again. And they were like, okay, well, we have another opportunity. This, which should be 2 surgeries, we're just going to go to the other side and do it and get it done because
Hmm.
risk death a second time. Surgeries are already pretty high risk for someone with the condition. But at this time, which the anesthesiologist told my parents, the same time, my mentor was in an airplane reading a book and got overwhelmed with the feeling that Krista needs energy. And so she sent it to me. And that is when everything came back without the doctor's assistance, which, as
Hmm.
you can imagine, though I already had skills and like abilities, really catalyzed. It was my call to action or call to adventure for all of this
Yeah.
stuff. And so I have the date, I have the time, and I have like everything surrounding my first death. And so I looked at the chart for that because I was studying timing techniques, the ancient timing techniques of Hellenistic astrology, and we were learning multiples of them so that you could see when multiple timing techniques converge and give testimony to something, that's when you know something big happens in that person's life. It's like fixed points that
Hmm.
are big story plot points in your life as compared to, a little bit more leeway of
Hmm.
this way or that way kind of happening through your life. And so I happened to look at that and I was like, oh, yeah, a Saturn Jupiter conjunction with like, there was Saturn, Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, all in my seventh house, all interacting with my sun and my descendant. So my sun, life force, in a sense, it's the
Hmm.
spirit and that kind of stuff. The moon was also involved, which also is your body. But Mercury was the ruler of the year in multiple cases. Mercury is the ruler of my lot of fortune, which is your health, wealth, and well being. My lot of fortune is in the eighth house. And so Mercury was exactly to the degree conjunct Jupiter. So where Saturn had conjoined my descendant at that time of, or at on that day, the death point, Saturn came there, but Jupiter and Mercury were working with it for divine intervention. And I just, Mercury being the sort of psychopomp, Jupiter being associated with Zeus, but also Christ energy and divinity and that kind of stuff. There is a sort of divine intervention thing. Venus also adding her testimony in her domicile in chariot with the sun, visible for once. She was in much better condition than she was when I was born. And all of this jargon is to say that you could tell something big happened that day. Um, so then
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm not going to consciously look for the next time I die, at least not during the retreat. Um, but I'm always been curious. There is a length of life technique that Valen said you should actually do first when we're working with a client, because you don't want to promise them something that they won't actually live to see. So that
Hmm.
was the idea. And so I'm there filling out my little worksheet, and every day we learned a different timing technique, and you would fill it out in this timeline of your life. And I was doing circumambulations and zodiacal releasing from fortune and from spirit. So basically, your life path and your body's condition. Circumambulations is very much like a timeline, just walking your ascendant around the chart. And then annual perfections, which gives you a narrowed down what's going on that year. All of them converged in this one very intense thing that happened. So I was like, I saw this really intense Saturnian moment happen. And I thought, oh dang, like I've seen in the resources that this is, as many of the ancient texts will say when they give an example, and then the end came. And that's how they'll describe someone's death. And so
Hmm.
I looked at it and I was just like, and then the end came. So I looked at all of the other techniques in alignment with it, and it was all Saturn and Mars and Mercury, who rules a lot of fortune in the eighth house, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I found one. I'm going to die. And so I brought it to my mentor and I showed her, I was like, hey, I think I found a death here. And she was like, yeah, the textbooks really point at that as being like if this happens in your life, it's not
Indicator.
everybody has it, right? Like some
Yeah.
people have different things, but this is like a hard first line of indication. Um, but the good news is where the doctors have told me every day is a good day until it's not. So like I live with it could be any minute. I actually astrologically may have until I'm 70 years old.
Woo!
When I called
That's
Dan, I
so
was like,
huge.
I know, I called Dan, I was like, hey, I think I found when I'm gonna die. And he was like, okay. And I was like, babe, ask me when, because like, ask me when it is, because it's good news. And he was like, okay, when? And I was like, 70. And we're operating under an understanding of 40 at the moment, at
Hmm.
best. So 70 is like, I'm not even halfway there, which feels really good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know. That was what my mom also said.
Yeah.
Sure. And I was like, it's 70. Oh,
Yeah.
yay.
That's basically a full life. And yeah, so motivation to keep exercising, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Stay healthy, stay fit, go that
Right now,
way.
I'm being a steward of the quality of life until 70, because the last thing I want to be is like, you have to live until you're 70, but you don't have any of your faculties. So
That would be no.
I'm a highly pessimistic person by nature, you guys. I'm so sorry. That's such a Scorpio moon to say. Like, you get to live until you're 70, but you're incapacitated. That will not be my case.
So funny. For a long time, this is just like a self-realization about myself. For a long time, my husband kept being like, stop being so optimistic about everything. You're such an optimist, blah, 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 blah. I was like, no, 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 I'm not an optimist. I
Yeah.
am a strong pessimist. I am a pessimist. But I outwardly am
Mhm.
optimistic in order to combat my internal pessimism.
This is me coaching myself. You have reached me at step 5.
Uh-huh. Like, no, 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 no. I am not an optimist. I'm not a, oh, yes, everything's good to go. I'm like, oh no, that could be real shit, but I'm gonna manifest that it's gonna be
I could count the times that I sit or stand somewhere with tears in my eyes, staring at the ceiling and being like, you did this to me. What's the point?
right. And don't get me wrong, and I've come through that more significantly. Like I said, this was a couple years ago, at this
Yeah.
point in time. And I do think that at this juncture of my life, I am a lot more optimistic. I trust more universe stuff. I know everything's going to work out in the way that it needs to. And I'm like really well connected with my guides and my team and my mission and why I'm here. And I very much trust in all of those things, which is just, interesting in general to kind of experience. But
Yeah. The
yeah,
first step has become, I know there's a reason for this, but I don't have to be happy about it just yet.
I know
Like,
there's a
I
reason, but
honor that I get to
your
feel this.
reason.
Yeah. Like, why did this happen? I'm sure it'll make sense later, but right now it's real frustrating. Yeah.
Right now, I hate it. I hate it
How
so
would I
much.
have to learn something else? I thought I was doing all right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
life's a
been there.
journey.
It is a journey. It is an adventure. And I do like where we're at. I do. It's
I
really
do.
fun. I will say, it's really cool to be in this kind of transitional space. Obviously, I just told like a really cool ghost story stuff. That's more of like the energy work I've been doing for myself. There's a lot of that, a lot of astral, a lot of these things. And I want to talk about more of like big universal comments, concepts, or like, hey, like today I talked to this random monster being thing that was there, and like we had to navigate that. Bunnies. Did you know? Maybe
Speaking of random monsters.
like they're like digging, and I'm like, could we not dig right now? We don't need to dig right now. Like it's
I
not
can
necessary.
hear my microphone, so hopefully it's
Okay,
on.
good. But just things like that. It's I love doing that type of work. And also I do love still doing like beginning work and getting people to that stage. I just think a lot of people right now are kind of reaching that, like, I need the big magical stuff coming
Right.
in,
Where,
and
yeah.
we're in that, and I love it, and I'm
Mhm.
I'm freaking here for it.
Yeah.
um
We
yeah,
didn't
it's
come
cool.
here for a docile time. And you know what? Thank God for that. Like,
No, we did not.
yeah. And that's what I try to remind myself. Like, when I am having a frustrating time, I'm having an adventure. And when I get
Mhm.
to retell the adventure, I want to make sure I'm telling it the way I want it to go. So I have to live it that way first.
Yeah.
And I honestly, in those moments, I appreciate everything that I have experienced and everything that I can even see coming, whether it's difficult or not, because it's like, I'm going to have a reason to feel like a
Mhm.
hero, at least for myself.
For at least a while.
Yeah.
Hmm. I get that completely.
I'm going to show myself how strong I am again. And I look forward to proving it to myself. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it's big. It's
Mhm.
good. Oh, yeah. Um, what other stories do I got recently? Um,
Unfortunately, go anyway. It's 3 o'clock on
oh
me.
my
Yeah.
gosh. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I will save my stories for later. It was going to be a Boris story, but you guys have to just watch it. One really quick thing I do want to mention. We are actually going to be ending the podcast Patreon.
Yes, because of
Um,
good things.
because of good things. So we feel like in the podcast Patreon, we cannot provide you with the value that you deserve in that space. It's just not as fluid of a location for us. So both of us are going to be creating in the coming weeks our own kind of podcast tiers of our individual Patreons. You can
Mhm.
join either one, you can join both. It's totally up to you. You're going to get a lot of the same. You'll get the episode early still in that tier, but it's also going to give us opportunity for like interactive call outs on the episode, and some kind of bonus material and things like that that we can do in our kind of individual spaces. Obviously, our individual spaces are going to be more geared towards our individual directions. So if you're more aligned with like obviously folk magic and astrology, you're going to want to go Krista. If you want to talk more about guides, and deities and psychic shit, that's where I'm going to be. But we are going to be doing that. So if you're in the podcast Patreon, you're like, oh no, that will just be moving to one or the other. You can again join both. You can join one. If you're already on a higher tier, be there our Patreons, you'll just get that content anyway. It's going to be a new tier for both of us. So we're both kind of like putting in a new tier of the podcast stuff. So just stay tuned for that. But I just wanted to mention that really quick before we close out the episode, is it will be moving over to that, which is exciting. I'm stoked about it. I think it'll be really cool.
Yeah, I think I'll be able to give more value that way.
I do too. Yeah. So anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. We appreciate you so deeply, and we hope that you embrace all this energy and you 1, 2, 3 go make some magic. Whoop, whoop. Whoop.